The greatest cognitive revolution in the history of Eastern thought did not start from a supernatural revelation or a prophecy from the stars, but originated from a brutal phenomenological surgery on the nature of existence. Siddhartha Gautama entered the history of philosophy not as a flying deity dispensing miracles but as an outstanding existential thinker, the greatest clinical diagnostician of humanity. He directly confronted the core contradiction of human existence with naked observation, stripping away all illusions of human superiority. The event of Siddhartha Gautama stepping out of the palace walls and witnessing the old, the sick and the dead is not merely a dogmatic tale but actually an epistemological rupture on the grandest scale. At that moment the veil of ignorance was torn apart. He realized that the entire system of power, wealth, youth and pleasure that humans frantically cling to is actually just a fragile structure cracking every second before the destructive power of time. His rejection of the throne was a subversive philosophical act, refusing to continue living in a simulated reality, refusing to inject pleasure anesthetics to escape a bleeding truth that all existing entities in this world carry the seeds of destruction. He entered the ascetic journey not to punish the physical body but to use his own mind as a laboratory to deeply dissect the structure of torment. The center of Siddhartha Gautama's existential medical diagnosis is the complete redefinition of a concept that has been severely misinterpreted by later academics and religions. Dukkha. In modern languages, people hastily translate dukkha as suffering, turning it into an extremely emotional concept associated with tears, starvation, or intense physical pain. This superficial imposition makes millions misunderstand the original philosophical nature, thinking that if they have stable health and a full bank account, they are not subject to dukkha. However, in ancient languages, dukkha carries a much deeper physical and ontological meaning. Its literal meaning is used to indicate a wheel mounted off its axle or a bone joint dislocated from its socket. When a wheel is off center, it can still roll, the carriage can still rush forward, but the entire operation process is always accompanied by friction, vibration, and a constant state of dissatisfaction. Dukkha, therefore, is not a pain that makes people scream, but the misalignment of existence. It is the state of continuous friction between a constantly flowing reality and a consciousness that always craves fixation. It is the instability, the feeling of lacking a solid foundation, the underlying anxiety flowing beneath every perfect shell of human life. To thoroughly dissect this friction, Siddhartha Gautama divided dukkha into three forms of existence, from the coarsest to the most subtle. The first, most obvious and recognizable form is dukkha, or the suffering of suffering. These are direct physiological and psychological pains that strike perception, the devastation of disease, the aging of cells, the agony when the body is injured, or the heart tearing grief when separated from loved ones. Dukkha represents the brutal bumps of the wheel of life that no living being can evade. However, his philosophy does not stop at that surface. The surgical knife continues to dig into the second form, viparinama dukkha, or the suffering of change. This is an ultimately subversive concept because it points out that even in the most sublimated moments of humans, dukkha is still present. Viparinama dukkha is the torment born from the destruction of joy. When you are immersed in the intoxication of love, when you just touch the peak of fame, an invisible fear is immediately activated in the mind, the fear that this moment cannot last forever. The nature of things is to constantly change. But humans want to freeze beauty, want to anchor joy as eternal property. The very effort to resist this natural flow creates extreme internal tension. The greater the joy, the stronger the intensity of clinging, and consequently, the panic when facing the risk of loss becomes more fierce. Viparinama Dukkha proves that all earthly pleasures are borrowed, and the price to pay for indulging in pleasure is the guarantee of a pain waiting to erupt in the future. But the pinnacle of Siddhartha Gautama's wisdom only truly exploded when he peeled back the third structural layer, the most subtle and thorny layer, Sankhara Dukkha, or all-pervasive suffering. If Dukkha is physical pain, Viparinama Dukkha is the fear of loss, then Sankhara Dukkha is an ontological instability encompassing all phenomena existing in the universe. Sankhara means fabrication or formation from multiple conditions. Sankhara Dukkha points out a cold truth that there is absolutely no object phenomenon or psychological state that can independently exist on its own. Everything is the product of a complex network of causes and conditions, assembled from countless different elements. Your body is a combination of food, water, and genetics. Your mind is a collection of memories, social prejudices, and chaotic neurological reactions. Because everything is assembled, they carry a fragile nature, lacking a solid core and continuously facing the risk of disintegration. Sankhara Dukkha is the ultimate feeling of emptiness. When humans realize they have no absolute anchor to cling to, it is the existential angst hiding even in the quietest moments of meditation, the echo of meaninglessness when perception must face a cold, constantly changing universe that does not obey human will. The deep root causing these three fierce layers of friction was attributed by Siddhartha Gautama to a single iron law, Anicca, or impermanence. Impermanence is not simply the life and death of a being, but the continuous birth and destruction in every fraction of a second of all material and spiritual phenomena. There is no static entity. The river you step into today is no longer the river of yesterday, and you yourself are already a completely different collection of cells and streams of thought. The universe is an eternal flow of energy, with no stops and no fixed boundaries. The greatest tragedy of humanity does not lie in the impermanent universe, but lies in the fact that human perception commits a fatal system error, the illusion of permanence. We use language, concepts, and intellect to segment reality, label everything, and believe they are fixed. The rupture between a surging reality on one side and a mind straining to freeze everything on the other is the cause of all breaks, torments, and hurts. If Dukkha is the default off-center state of a carriage operating on the foundation of impermanence, then what psychological mechanism, what invisible force hidden deep in the shadows of the unconscious is frantically operating this resistance, making humans voluntarily turn themselves into the most loyal prisoners of clinging? To answer the question about the invisible force continuously warping the axle of reality and pushing humans into a state of perpetual dissatisfaction, Siddhartha Gautama provided a decisive diagnosis in the second step of the grand surgery, samudaya, or the origin of suffering. If Dukkha is the symptom of an incurable disease, then samudaya is the process of tracing the very root of the pathogen silently multiplying in the mental ecosystem. He pointed out the single culprit causing all the torment of human existence, which is Tanha, an ancient term often translated as craving or thirst. However, just like Dukkha, understanding Tanha in its ordinary sense would diminish its sharp philosophical nature. Tanha is not merely trivial material desires, the craving for physical pleasure, or the greed for wealth and fame. At the deepest level of phenomenology, Tanha is an existential thirst, a frantic and automatic reaction mechanism of perception aimed at manipulating the flow of time and reality. It is the desperate thirst of the mind, wanting to swallow whole and permanently prolong experiences that bring pleasant feelings, while simultaneously being a fierce resistance, expulsion, and rejection of any experience that brings unpleasant feelings. The human mind, under the manipulation of Tanha, turns into a ruthless and blind sorting machine. It continuously labels the world into two opposite poles. I like this, so it must stay forever. I hate that, so it must be destroyed immediately. But the greatest tragedy of Tanha lies in the fact that it demands an impossible condition, fixation in a universe inherently governed by the law of Anicca, meaning impermanence. We crave to keep a youthful beauty that never fades, crave a passionate love that never cools down, crave an inviolable position of power. We try to use bare hands to grab the rushing water flowing through our fingers. The tighter we try to hold, the more the water slips away, and the only thing left is the bleeding friction of our palms. Suffering is not naturally born from a flower withering, because withering is an objective and beautiful law of nature. Suffering is born from our insane craving, wanting that flower to remain fresh on the branch forever. Internal torment is the result of an asymmetrical war between a constantly moving reality on one side and an ego straining to demand the universe to operate according to the exact script it has written. The resistance against reality is the massive energy source nourishing all pain. When you refuse to accept what is present in this moment, whether it is an illness, a criticism, or a loss, you are voluntarily locking yourself in a psychological cell you built yourself. At this point, the surgical knife of Siddhartha Gautama touched the deepest and most shocking cognitive layer in the entire history of human thought. He posed a question that overturned the entire philosophical foundation. If there is a thirst, then who is the one thirsting? If there is an attachment, then who is the one attaching? For thousands of years, humans have always believed absolutely that hidden deep inside this physical shell, behind the chaotic streams of thoughts, exists an soul, an independent, intact, and unchanging ego. We call it ourselves. But Siddhartha Gautama, through microscopic meditative observation, coldly declared a truth that collapsed all illusions, anatta, meaning non-self. This concept asserts that the I we spend our whole life serving, protecting, and taking pride in is actually just an optical illusion of perception, a simulated structure automatically assembled by the mind from countless impermanent fragments. He divided humans into 5 groups of continuously gathering and dispersing elements, including physical body sensations, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. None of those elements stand still, and none of them can claim to be an independent I. Just like a carriage is merely a noun, temporarily used when parts, like wheels, axles, cabins, and reins, are assembled together. If dismantled piece by piece, the carriage disappears. It has no independent carriage nature existing outside the assembled parts. The human I also operates exactly on that illusory assembly mechanism. From birth to adulthood, our minds are like diligent scavengers. It picks up a name given by parents, picks up viewpoints from schools, picks up a professional title from society, picks up the bank account balance, and even picks up past traumas. It uses the glue of memory to stick all those fragmented and impermanent pieces together, then stamps on it a giant label named I. When this artificial I is formed, it immediately generates an urgent need to self-affirm its existence, to expand its territory and protect its integrity against all risks. And this is the ultimate origin of all human tragedies. When a colleague criticizes your report, they are actually just discussing a pile of scrap paper and numbers. But because you mistakenly identified that report with the value of the I, you feel deeply insulted. Blood rushes to your brain and hatred explodes. When you lose an asset, you do not just regret the banknotes, but you ache because a part of the I has been trimmed. The more the I is patched with fame, knowledge, and assets, the bulkier, heavier, and more fragile it becomes. Modern humans spend their whole youth building magnificent ego castles, but must live in constant fear every day, knowing that just a small fluctuation of reality is enough to collapse that entire structure. The torment of humanity is the consequence of us voluntarily becoming slaves to a non-existent ghost. Tanha and the ego are a deadly loop. The ego generates thirst to gather everything, to reinforce its own existence. And the thirst makes the ego fatter, greedier, and more dictatorial. In that frantic race, humans completely lose their original freedom. We live but are essentially acting out a play scripted by the ego, continuously reacting mechanically to stimuli from the outside world. We rejoice when the ego is stroked, and we suffer tremendously when the ego is bruised. The grand surgery of Siddhartha Gautama stripped the culprit bare, pointing out that the chains imprisoning humans do not come from destiny, do not come from society, but come from the very flawed cognitive structure inside each individual. If the entire castle of suffering is built on an illusory foundation of an independent I, and if all torment is merely the hallucination of a ghost fearing disappearance, then is there a state of perception that allows humans to manually dismantle this simulated structure, completely permanently extinguishing the existential thirst without falling into the deep abyss of depression or cold nihilism. To completely resolve the existential crisis, when humans realize they are merely a collection of impermanent fragments clinging to an illusion, Siddhartha Gautama introduced the third step in his grand treatment protocol, Nirvana, or the cessation of suffering. If the origin of suffering is pointing out the malignant tumor named the ego and craving, then the cessation is the firm declaration that this tumor can be completely eradicated, and the torment of human existence can be ended right in this current lifetime. The ultimate destination of this eradication is defined by a term that has become the central symbol of the entire Eastern ideological system, but is also the most misunderstood, distorted, and deified concept in history: Nirvana. For thousands of years, under the cover of religious cloaks and folk beliefs, Nirvana has been turned into a distant paradise, a promised land paved with gold and silver, where devout souls will be reborn after breathing their last breath to enjoy an eternal life with no shadow of suffering. Turning Nirvana into a geographical location outside of space and time, or a reward in the afterlife, is actually the most sophisticated trap of the ego itself. The ego being too terrified of the prospect of vanishing, deliberately molded a concept of nirvana tinged with materialism and eternity, so it could continue to crave, continue to cling, and continue to prolong its illusory existence into the next life. But the original philosophy of Siddhartha Gautama ruthlessly smashed that cowardly self-comforting script. Under the lens of pure phenomenology, Nirvana is absolutely not a noun, indicating a place nor a realm after death. The original meaning of the word nirvana in ancient languages is brutally simple and cold. It means the blowing out, just like a fiercely burning candle when a strong gust of wind blows past the flame, suddenly extinguishes the state of the candle after the flame no longer exists is the state of nirvana. So what did Siddhartha Gautama want us to blow out? He demanded that we manually extinguish the three flames that are burning the mental ecosystem day and night, the flame of greed wanting to hoard everything for the I, the flame of hatred wanting to destroy anything that goes against the will of the I, and the flame of blind ignorance believing that the I is a real and independent entity. When these three flames are extinguished, the psychological state of friction, torment, and dissatisfaction also instantly vanishes. Nirvana therefore is a cognitive state, a radical shift of the reference system right in the present moment. It is the absence of dukkha. Just like health is not an object you can buy at a store, health is simply the state when the body is absent of disease. Nirvana is not something new added to your perception, but it is the empty spaciousness that appears after you have completely removed the standard labels and the clinging burdens that you have deluded yourself with for many years. A terrifying existential question is immediately posed by the ego. If we completely extinguish craving, extinguish all clinging, and smash the personal ego, will humans not fall into a cold, nihilistic state, a terrifying emptiness like a lifeless log or a senseless stone? This is the primal fear that makes most of humanity shrink back before the door of awakening. The human mind is too accustomed to defining its existence through noise. We think we are only truly living when we are craving something, when we are fighting to snatch something, or when we are suffering because of something. When told to let go of all those things, the mind immediately feels its survival threatened because it cannot imagine an existence without its own shadow. However, the extinction that Siddhartha Gautama spoke of is absolutely not nihilism. When a room is cleared of garbage and bulky furniture, that room does not disappear or become useless. On the contrary, it becomes a vast, free, and light-filled space. Similarly, when the artificial ego is destroyed, humans are not turned into emotionless machines, but their perception will bloom to the sharpest and purest level. They reach a state of observing reality called Tatthata, meaning seeing all phenomena exactly as they are happening, without adding, without subtracting, and without distorting through the lens of binary prejudice. A person reaching the state of nirvana, meaning a person who has successfully dismantled all watchtowers of clinging, still lives, still breathes, still works, and still interacts in this turbulent world. But the quality of their presence has completely changed. Their perception is no longer a craving cage imprisoning reality, but has turned into a calm and transparent mirror. When a flower blooms, the mirror fully reflects the beauty of the flower without generating the greed to possess it and take it home. When the flower fades, the mirror reflects the withering without clinging to a single bit of regret or pain. Reality just passes through the mirror of their mind completely, vividly, and brilliantly, but cannot leave any tormenting scratch, because there is no longer an I standing there to suffer the hurt. They can still love more deeply and compassionately than anyone, but it is an empty love. That does not demand reciprocation, is not possessive, and does not carry the fear of separation. They can still build great careers, but they act with absolute dedication to the present without binding themselves to the pressure of success or failure, glory or disgrace. The collapse of the ego does not bring death, but it brings a grand rebirth of original freedom. Humans finally end the bloody war with the universe, discard the perfect controlling blueprint to completely let themselves float along the eternal flow of the law of impermanence. Siddhartha Gautama proved with his own life that absolute peace does not lie in running away from the world, nor does it lie in climbing to the peak of power to force the world to kneel before one's commands. Absolute peace only appears when we manually smash the thermometer measuring happiness by wealth and fame, extinguish all illusions about an eternal ego, and bravely face naked reality with an empty mind. But recognizing the destination of liberation is one thing. How the feet of an ordinary human with a mind still wallowing in automatic reactive habits and an ego still stubbornly clinging to every small prejudice can step by step dismantle this solid prison system is a completely different challenge. If Nirvana is a state of completely eliminating clinging, then what practical combat method must a modern human besieged by financial pressure, by bills to pay and heavy social responsibilities use to forge the cognitive sword, cutting every invisible chain right amid this chaotic, dusty world, to step from theoretical understanding of Nirvana to experiencing it in reality? Siddhartha Gautama gave humanity the final piece in his medical diagnosis, Magga, or the path. If the previous three parts were pathological analysis and determining treatment goals, then Magga is an extremely detailed clinical regimen, a highly practical practice roadmap. He understood that just sitting there and using reason to analyze non-self or impermanence would never be powerful enough to collapse a clinging system built and reinforced by the ego over decades. Intellectual perception is only the beginning. To truly break the shackles, humans need a training method capable of reprogramming the entire automatic, reactive habits of perception. The heart of this practice roadmap is placed on a foundational principle, the middle way. Before achieving awakening, Siddhartha Gautama personally experienced the two most opposing life extremes of human existence. He had wallowed in ultimate sensual pleasure at the royal palace, and he had also tortured his physical body to skin and bones during 6 years of asceticism in the deep forest. From those flesh and blood experiences, he realized that both these paths are sophisticated traps of the ego. Indulging in pleasure inflates the ego with greed, while physical asceticism nourishes a more subtle ego, which is spiritual arrogance and hatred towards one's own body. The middle way is not a half-hearted compromise, nor a mixture of a little good and a little bad. It is the art of tuning a lute string. If the string is too loose, the sound is dull and cannot sing. If the string is too tight, it will snap as soon as a finger touches it. Only when the string is tuned to the right tension can it create the most melodious music. The middle way is a life attitude of not clinging but also not rejecting, not attaching to pleasure but also not extremely escaping reality. To materialize the middle way principle into life, Siddhartha Gautama outlined an 8-branched practice system called the Eightfold Path. However, under the lens of practical philosophy and psychology, we do not need to memorize these dry dogmas. The core of this entire system can be condensed into the two sharpest swords: right view and right mindfulness. These are the ultimate tools for modern humans to use right in the fierce business battlefield or in the chaos of family life. The first sword is right view, meaning a clairvoyant vision piercing through all outer shells of phenomena to see the true nature of things. Right view is you applying the laws of impermanence and non-self into every corner of daily life. Imagine you are facing rage from a boss at work or a bitter criticism from the crowd on social media. According to the normal reflex of a mind lacking right view, your ego will immediately jump out to catch the bullets. It labels that boss as an enemy. It considers that criticism a knife stabbing straight into the dignity of the I, and it commands the body to counterattack with anger or withdraw into depression. But when equipped with right view, your reference system completely changes. You view that criticism simply as sound waves traveling in the air, originating from a mind stressed by thousands of different conditions of that boss. Those sounds have no ability to hurt anyone unless you voluntarily pick them up and stab them into the illusion of your I. Right view helps you dismantle the emotional bomb before it can detonate, returning all things to their naked nature, just phenomena arising and passing away according to natural laws. The second sword, also the core of all transformation, is right mindfulness. If right view is the map, then right mindfulness is the feet walking on that map. Right mindfulness does not mean you must hide on a high mountain, close your eyes and sit motionless like a stone statue. True awakening must be forged right in the noise of the city, right in a traffic jam intersection, or while you are washing a pile of dishes. Right mindfulness is the ability to anchor perception fully in the present moment, the ability to observe the flow of the mind without being swept away by that flow. When a pleasant feeling appears, right mindfulness notes its presence but does not arise the greed to keep it. When an unpleasant feeling rushes in, right mindfulness observes it with quiet curiosity without generating any resistance or expulsion. Thanks to right mindfulness, humans can create a grand space between the stimulus from the outside environment and the reaction of the mind. In that space, human freedom is born. You are no longer an automatic machine pulled by the old habits of the ego. When anger rises, you do not immediately spew insults at others. Instead, you take a step back inside your consciousness, observing that anger, like observing a dark cloud flying across the sky of the mind. You see it born, see it rolling, and then see it vanish without needing to intervene. By practicing this non-judgmental observation repeatedly, thousands of times in daily life, you are gradually starving the ego. You are cutting off the nourishing energy source of the clinging habit, causing the torment tumor to automatically shrink and disappear. The combination of right view and right mindfulness creates an art of living freely in the world that no philosophy can match. A person practicing the middle way can still enter business, can still earn millions of dollars, can still build a warm family and contribute immense values to society. They are neither passive nor pessimistic. Their only and biggest difference compared to the rest of the world lies in the fact that they no longer identify their self-worth with those achievements or failures. They play the game of life with absolute passion, trying their best in every present moment. But their minds are completely empty and free from the pressure of results. If success comes, they smile and receive it without arrogance. If failure strikes, they calmly step over it. Without despair. They walk through the dusty mortal world, but not a single dust grain can blur their transparent mirror of perception. The practice path that Siddhartha Gautama left behind completed the grand picture of human liberation from facing the instability of reality, tracing the culprit named the ego, to outlining the destination of stillness and handing over the practical combat method. This ideological system has gone a perfect full circle. But as we stand at the end of this path, looking back at the entire journey of destroying and rebuilding perception, what core philosophy can we conclude to carry as luggage for the rest of our lives? And does this ultimate enlightenment truly turn us into superhuman beings, or does it simply bring us back to our most human, most original, and most authentic nature? The grand cognitive surgery of Siddhartha Gautama took us from the painful disillusionment of impermanent reality through tracing the ultimate root of the ego. Ghosts are experiencing the empty state of Nirvana, right in the heart of life. Now, as we stand at the end of this grand philosophical roadmap, we must face one final subversive truth: the ultimate enlightenment is not about turning a human into a supernatural being, escaping from the world, but it is the journey of bringing a human back to their most original, most authentic, and most human nature. After over 2,500 years, the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama still shine with a brilliant existential value, because he promised no magical liberation. He gave us new eyes to look at, and old world eyes washed clean from the dust of prejudice and illusion. The core philosophy that each of us can carry as luggage for the rest of our lives is the ability to live a life without labels. Imagine an existence where you no longer have to strain yourself to protect a title, no longer have to patch a personal image before the world's eyes, and no longer tremble every time impermanent reality crashes into your expectations. That is absolute freedom, a state of presence where every barrier between the self and the universe has completely vanished. Throughout the long script of life, the ego is always a brilliant screenwriter, but also a ruthless tyrant. It forces us to play too many roles, wear too many masks, to fit social standards, success pressures, and failure fears. We spend our youth building a solid cognitive castle, but accidentally turn ourselves into prisoners in that very castle. The grand legacy that Siddhartha Gautama left is not a religion to worship, but a revolution, deconstructing the ego. When you bravely dismantle the final mask, you will see that beneath the flashy shell or scarred traumas there is no eternal I that needs protection. Only the pure flow of life, of sensation, and of perception is harmoniously blending with the universe. Enlightenment is actually just the moment you realize the cage imprisoning you all this time has no lock, and you yourself are the one firmly grasping the illusory bars. When greed is replaced by appreciating the present, when hatred is transformed into empty compassion, and when ignorance is lit by the torch of right view, humans will reach an invulnerable peace. That peace does not depend on whether the world treats you well, but depends on whether you have completely mastered how your mind reacts to the world. The art of living freely, taught by Siddhartha Gautama, is the perfect combination of fierce engagement and leisurely letting go. An awakened person still works diligently, still loves passionately, and still contributes fully to human progress. But they do all those things with the attitude of a person strolling in the garden of reality. They no longer consider success or failure, glory or disgrace as labels, defining their human value. They understand that every phenomenon in this world, from a dust grain to a galaxy, from a breath to an empire, follows the iron law of Anicca or impermanence. Thanks to this clairvoyance, they are no longer shocked by events, no longer fall before losses. They live fully in every present moment because they know that outside this present no other reality exists. The past is just ashes of memory, and the future is just a mirage of hope. Only this moment, when the breath is going in and out, when perception is observing reality emptily, is when life truly happens. Awakening brings us back to the child state of the soul, but with the sharp wisdom of a sage. It is the ability to be surprised by the beauty of a falling leaf, the ability to smile at a storm, and the power to embrace all human suffering with a non-clinging heart. Ultimate enlightenment does not turn us into metaphysical beings who can control the universe by will. It turns us into humans who truly know how to live. It frees us from the nightmare of clinging, frees us from the slavery of emotions and narrow binary prejudices. When you are no longer imprisoned in the watchtower of the self, you will see yourself present in all and all present in yourself. Compassion at this point is no longer a forced moral duty but a natural blooming of perception when realizing every being is subject to the law of Dukkha. You love everyone not because they are like you but because you see your own pain and thirst in them. It is a love without borders, without barriers, and without conditions. This is the only saving medicine for a world being torn by conflicts, hatred, and extreme selfishness. The grand surgery of Siddhartha Gautama finally closed with a very simple but powerful message: freedom does not lie anywhere distant. Freedom lies right in your ability to drop the illusory mask. Right now, you are the architect of the happiness castle, and you are the one holding the key to open the prison door of torment. Closing the script on Siddhartha Gautama, we do not just carry academic, philosophical knowledge, but more importantly, we carry a seed of awakening that has been planted in consciousness. Every time you pause before an angry reaction, every time you observe the breath to calm an anxiety, and every time you bravely face the truth without running into pleasure, that is when his spirit is living again in you. Liberation is not a destination to reach but a way to walk. It is the path of quiet observation, of empty compassion, and of a label-free wisdom. We will continue walking on this path of clarity, not to become someone grander but to return to being ourselves in the most complete and free way amid the shifting flow of life. The silence after each philosophical script is not the end but the opening for a new dimension of perception where each individual will manually verify the meaning of existence through their own authentic living experience. Are you ready to put down the burden of the self, to start walking the first 3 steps on the ground of reality right in this very moment?